Far Cry 5 has a lot going on. Armed cultists, chaotic shootouts, and a storyline filled with survival, control, and resistance. But if you slow down a little, there's something else in the background. Something that's always present, but easy to overlook. The radio. You'll hear it in cars, in houses, at cult outposts. It plays sermons, hymns, and speeches from Eden's Gate, the cult that's taken over Hope County. And while it might seem like just part of the game's atmosphere, the radio is actually one of the most subtle and powerful tools of control in Far Cry 5. In most open-world games, radio is just there for flavor, something to fill the silence, or give you a few jokes and songs while you explore. But in Far Cry 5, it's something more serious. Eden's Gate uses the radio like a weapon. Not a loud one, but a persistent one. It's always broadcasting, always reaching people, always repeating its version of reality. And in a place like Hope County, where communication with the outside world is cut off, there's no alternative perspective, no outside news, just the cult. Which means the radio doesn't just tell people what's happening, it tells them how to think about it.
If you are hearing these words, then there is hope.
If you stop and really listen to the cult's broadcasts, they're not chaotic or unhinged like you might expect. They're structured, calm, almost soothing. You'll hear Joseph Seed, or one of his siblings, speaking like a preacher, guiding followers with a mix of prophecy, fear, and reassurance.
We will be ready.
It sounds polished, almost professional. That's what makes it convincing. To NPCs in the world, this isn't some fringe lunatic screaming into the void. It's the voice they wake up to, the voice they hear at dinner, the voice that fills every space they live in. Over time, it starts to feel normal, even comforting. And that's how propaganda works best. Not by yelling, but by whispering the same thing again and again until it feels true. Joseph Seed is everywhere. His voice specifically, and it's designed to sound like the voice of reason. His sermons are full of religious metaphors and talk of salvation, sin, and the end of the world. But the way he says it, slow, confident, never rushed, gives his words weight. He's not trying to convince people with facts. He's using tone, timing, and language to make his message feel inevitable. The game doesn't just show you this through cutscenes. It builds his character across dozens of tiny moments, through speakers and radios scattered across the world. And after hearing him for the 50th time, you start to understand why people follow him. Not because they're stupid, but because he's persuasive. It's not just what's said, it's how it's used. The broadcasts aren't neutral. They're part of a constant psychological pressure campaign. The cult doesn't just use radio to spread ideas. They use it to make you feel watched, small and powerless. That sense of being surrounded, of never getting a break, is baked into the audio design. Sometimes you'll walk into a space and hear the same message you heard an hour ago, word for word, but now it's coming from a new place, with new implications. It's not an accident. It's there to remind you that Joseph's influence isn't just physical, it's mental, and it's everywhere. Then there's the music, and it's not just there to be creepy. Eden's Gate has its own songs, hymns basically. They sound like old American folk tunes, soft guitars, harmonized vocals, but the lyrics are loaded with messages about sacrifice, obedience, and following the Father. The music does a clever thing. It makes submission feel safe, peaceful, even holy, and because the songs are well produced and kind of catchy, they stick with you, even if you're actively fighting the people who made them. You might not even notice the shift at first, but it's there. You go from hearing a song and thinking it's weird to realizing you've memorized it. Far Cry 5 leans into repetition in a big way. You'll hear the same sermon in multiple outposts, the same song in different cars. And yeah, at times it might feel repetitive as a player, but that's exactly the point. Real-life cults don't just tell you their ideas once and hope you're sold. They repeat the message constantly until it becomes part of your daily routine, until you stop questioning it. The game replicates this by making sure you live inside that repetition. It might not be loud, but it's constant, and that constant presence shapes how the world feels. Like Eden's Gate is always in control even when you can't see them. Another detail that stands out, there's no other radio station. You don't tune through frequencies and find some regular Montana rock station. There's just static, or the cult. That lack of contrast is important. Eden's Gate hasn't just taken over, they've erased everything else. It's not just a power grab, it's total information control. No one can challenge the message if they never hear anything different. That kind of silence from the outside world is what really locks people in, and the game makes sure you feel that same kind of isolation. As a player, even if you're not thinking about it, the radio shapes how you feel in Far Cry 5. It makes the world feel more tense, more claustrophobic. You're not just fighting back in shootouts, you're resisting this constant mental pressure. You can blow up an outpost, but you still hear Joseph's voice the next time you hop in a truck. It's subtle, but it works. It builds this sense that you're trapped in someone else's world. And it's not until you start pushing back that things begin to change. When you start liberating zones in the game, something cool happens. The radio shifts. Sometimes you'll hear resistance members using the airwaves to communicate, joke, or even play music that isn't drenched in cult ideology. It's small, but it matters. Hearing new voices after hours of hearing the same sermons feels like progress, like real change. It's the game's way of showing that Eden's Gate's grip isn't unbreakable. It can be disrupted, and that makes the quiet moments, when the cult isn't talking, feel that much more powerful. And then there's silence. Sometimes the most noticeable thing in Far Cry 5 is when there's nothing at all. No sermon, no song, just the wind and your own footsteps. That silence hits differently. It's not just peaceful, it's the absence of control. It's the moment you realize you're not being spoken to. You're not being guided, pushed, or watched. After so much noise, that quiet becomes one of the most powerful things the game offers. The radio in Far Cry 5 isn't a gimmick or a background detail, it's a part of how the game tells its story, quietly, consistently, and effectively. Through sermons, music, and repetition, the radio becomes a character of its own. It spreads fear, creates obedience, and builds an atmosphere where Eden's Gate feels inescapable. It's a reminder that control doesn't always come through force. Sometimes it comes through the things we hear every day. And in Far Cry 5, the cult doesn't just want your attention, they want your mind. And they know how to get there, one broadcast at a time.